On episode 1, we set the scene of terror happening in the Sunny Slope area of Phoenix. 5 young women found dead near or along canals. DNA found at 2 of the crime scenes was linked to the same person, but police couldn't figure out whose it was until decades later. Then a string of crimes began in Washington. The common connection to all of these women, their proximity to one mysterious man.
It was just scary when I actually took the pictures because he had this masked person in the back seat.
He also had a lot of photos. You can go to his Facebook pages with the law enforcement.
He was the invisible man. He had issues with women and how they respond to his actions.
You don't know what's in their mind. You don't know what's going to trigger them to do something that they do.
This is True Crime Arizona, The Zombie Hunter.
He dressed in this zombie hunter kind of cyberpunk outfit.
People knew him, at least the character he played, but it wasn't a character he played on stage or in a movie. The character he created was played in real life. To understand the depth of this case, you first have to understand the man at the center of it all, and admittedly, figuring him out is kind of a mystery. His name is Bryan Patrick Miller, but those who knew him didn't really seem to know the real Miller. He was and is the Zombie Hunter.
I've spoke to him in passing, so he always seemed kind of like quiet, odd. His car was crazy.
We knew of him, yes. You couldn't miss the car, and you just always had wondered what the heck he was up to.
It's been in every parade you can see out here. Everybody knows it. Oh yeah, the Zombie Hunter, Zombie Hunter.
His car. Everybody always talked about the car. That's because it wasn't a Honda Civic or a Ford Explorer. Miller bought an old police car. He doctored it up, but not how you'd think. He gave it working police lights. He wrote Zombie Hunter on the back and dripped fake blood down the sides.
It was just scary when I actually took the pictures because I noticed that he had this masked person actually in the back seat.
It looked as if Miller had a bloodied zombie under arrest.
He also had a lot of photos. You can go to his Facebook pages with the law enforcement. So his car's always with a Maricopa County Sheriff. He's posing with police guys.
It was different. So was his costume, if you will. Miller wore a long, dark trench coat, a helmet, dark goggles, and walked around with a giant Gatling gun. It was his Zombie Hunter getup. He was proud of it.
Next thing you know, we're meeting at conventions, parking his car. He's with the people from The Walking Dead. It's that ironic. Walking Dead TV show, Dawn of the Dead movies.
The Zombie Hunter was everywhere. Phoenix FearCon, Arizona Steampunk Society, the Renaissance Festival, and other conventions. If there were alternate realities and fantastical costumes involved, Bryan Patrick Miller was there, or the Zombie Hunter was there. His social media reflected the same. He had dozens of social media pages. On Facebook, pictures of himself with Puddles the Clown, pictures with what he called the Zombie Nut House, wearing shirts that said, "We kill 'em dead." On his DeviantArt social media page, he titled art, "Used, Abused, and Left for Dead." His Arizona Steampunk Society page bio read, "I'm a certified state of Arizona zombie hunter," smiley face. "I love the steampunk aesthetics and enjoy the fantasy technology that goes with it."
It was the steampunk and his car and everything, and his persona was his road to actually be curing his, he was such an introvert that he was actually becoming an extrovert.
Keen Azariah met Miller in 2010, and the two became friends through their shared interests: steampunk, horror movies, and a mutual shyness with outsiders.
He was the invisible man, basically, you know. And I could see how, looking from the outside in, it would seem like he should stick out like a sore thumb. But as someone who actually was looking from the inside out, he was one of the herd, you know.
There was something that stood out to Keene about his friend Bryan. Something angry, something bitter, directed toward women.
It wasn't just me. Other friends had to try to counsel him, you know, online sometimes. He had issues with women and how they respond to his actions. And it really, really burnt him. I think it really, you know, boiled inside him.
I need your full name and date of birth, please.
Bryan Patrick Miller.
But we wanted to know who Bryan Patrick Miller was before the zombie hunter. Thousands and thousands of police report pages document a troubled little boy, a past of abuse, loneliness, and an obsession with fantasy.
As a little boy, Bryan Patrick Miller recalled the good days in the 1970s, bowling and long days at the beach, living in Hawaii. Life was simple. His mom was in law enforcement. His dad was stationed at the army post in Hawaii. Miller would go visit him at the post often. He told detectives he loved his dad very much. But Miller's days with his dad were numbered. He rode a motorcycle, and just before Christmas in 1977, went around a blind turn. He was hit head-on by a truck that came around the corner. Miller was left without a father figure early on. His mom left the motorcycle on their driveway for a month, even after his dad died. Losing his father young, it rocked Miller, because that was his role model, the person he loved more than anything or anybody. His relationship with his mom wasn't the same at all.
Trouble for Miller began young, after he and his mom moved to Phoenix, Arizona. His juvenile record is lengthy. Run-ins with the law started at 11 years old. The young boy charged with arson of an occupied building. The next year, shoplifting. The next 2 charges, curfew and criminal damage. Then in 1989, things escalated a whole lot. He was 16 years old, charged with attempted second-degree murder after stabbing Celeste Gowan while she was walking to work near the Paradise Valley Mall. It was a level of violence Miller had never shown. And though he would commit another theft right after he got out of juvenile detention for the attack on Celeste, the relationships he made at that detention facility and right after revealed exactly where the motive for that vicious stabbing came from.
According to police reports, Miller met Daryl Bancher while in juvenile detention in 1990. Bancher was a juvenile chaplain who helped transition the convicts from the facility to independent living to get back on their feet. He helped Miller find an apartment to start fresh. Something he remembered right away: Miller loved fantasy worlds and zombies. Bancher told police he remembered Miller saying he was physically and emotionally abused by his mom. He described Miller as broken and emotionally disturbed, and perceived him as a loner. Other friends echoed the same memories. According to the documents, Miller once told his longtime friend Gerald Schrock about the time he came home with a pizza for dinner while riding his bike and accidentally dropped it, but his mom still forced him to eat it, covered in dirt. Schrock told investigators Miller's mom was scary and scowling. Miller's friend Rich told police he believed Miller's mom expected him to be more grown up and believed that harmed him developmentally. He recalled Miller liked toys and cosplay and thought his worst fault was that he would get too wrapped up in escapist fantasy.
But maybe that was to try and escape his own life with his mom. Daryl Bancher believed the abuse by Miller's mom left him deeply angry and recalled Miller saying his relationship with his mom was over when he turned 18. Bancher said Miller seemed to regret stabbing Celeste, but told him he thought Celeste was his mom walking down the street, and that's why he attacked her. This exact same narrative was told over and over to detectives by longtime friends of Miller's and those he lived with in a Sunny Slope apartment complex after he got out of detention. And perhaps the most concerning story was the one he told Phoenix police detectives Troy Hillman and Stuart Summershoe. Miller told them both about the abuse by his mom. Summershoe asked him what the worst thing his mom ever did to him was. Miller replied, "Come at me with knives and scissors and threatened to kill me. And if it wasn't that, she'd be banging my head up against the wall or on the floor, hitting me with a belt, didn't matter where she hit me at. On my arms, my legs, and you're familiar with that type of belt. It's a law enforcement belt, police belt. And if I was lucky, usually I got hit with the buckle." He also said his mom used to threaten to cut off his penis. Everything he told to investigators or friends alluded to deep-rooted pain and resentment for his mom, enough to try and kill her when he thought he had the chance. It was just the wrong person. Celeste wouldn't be the last time he stabbed someone.
This morning, bicycle officers began to
reportedly linked to
our suspect in this case is certainly a collector of items. A hoarding situation really is what we have, floor to ceiling within the home.
That was just one troubling part of Bryan Patrick Miller. Every single person interviewed by detectives said the same thing. Miller's hygiene was atrocious. Daryl Bancher said at times he would have to remind Miller to shower. Schrock said he was initially repulsed by Miller because of his hygiene and appearance. His church outreach leader told detectives his apartment smelled of rotting food and described the smell as haunting, as something she had never smelled before. But despite his flaws, his friends still spent a fair amount of time with him, and they all recalled one of Miller's favorite things to do, ride his bike. In fact, he didn't have a car for several years after he got out of detention. Several of them would frequently ride bikes with Miller in the North Phoenix area, in and near Sunny Slope in the early 90s. Even on bike rides, Miller demonstrated some strange and gross behavior, enough for Gerald Schrock to recall a specific bike ride with Miller. Schrock told police the two were riding on a path when they passed a woman's underwear on the ground. Miller stopped his bike and went back to look at it. Schrock said Miller then picked up the underwear, put it in his pocket, and took it home. Certainly not something normal at all.
Police found her body along the canal near Metro
Difficult
Center.
to tell how long the head was in the canal. It may have been placed there after the dive was made.
Miller's friends remembered the canal murders and the extensive media coverage about them. Angelo Brasso and Melanie Burness were bike riding along the canal when they were murdered. It was near where they all would go on bike rides. An eerie feeling.
Well, the body is decapitated. There are multiple injuries which our homicide detectives do not want to discuss at this point.
Daryl Bancher told police he remembered the murders because they were so disturbing. He also remembered something Miller told him. In 1994, Miller told Bancher he was upset because investigators wanted to talk to him about the canal murders. But that was it. He couldn't remember what, if anything, came after investigators questioned Miller about it. life went on.
Miller eventually married a woman named Amy. They were young but happy. Amy told investigators they'd go to church together every Sunday. The two had a daughter together. Friends said Miller loved his daughter, that he valued her above all. Life would take them to Washington State, but Miller's problems and violent tendencies wouldn't be left behind in Arizona. Issues would arise in Washington, so much so their family moved back to Arizona. But what happened in Washington wouldn't be brought to light until years later.
And that brings us to 2014 and the beginning of 2015, the era of the zombie hunter. The goggles, the gun, the trench coat, the car, festivals, pictures, role play, the whole 9 yards.
Undercover Phoenix police detectives were able
until his facade came crashing down.
Some people will hide in plain sight, and maybe that's what he was doing.
Coming up on episode 3 of True Crime Arizona, The Zombie Hunter.
In about, I'd say 2010, I became aware that it could be applied to cold cases.
There's no real way to determine what they are going to do and how they are going to do something.
And at that moment, I went, oh my God, they got him!
True Crime Arizona, The Zombie Hunter is hosted by me, Brianna Whitney.
And me, Morgan Lowe. Sergio Hernandez is the producer.
This episode was edited by Shane Egan. It's a production of Arizona's Family, CBS 5, 3TV, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.
Breast milk science. It's a thing, and it's our thing. We're ByHeart. We're an infant formula company on a mission to get a lot closer to the most superfood on the planet, breast milk. Our patented protein blend has more of the important and most abundant proteins found in breast milk. We're the first and only U.S.-made formula to use organic, grass-fed whole milk, not skim. We make our formula in our own factories in Iowa, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, using a small batch manufacturing process that works to preserve the integrity of our ingredients. We ran the largest clinical trial by a new infant formula company in 25 years, and clinically proved benefits like easier digestion, less gas, and softer poops versus a leading infant formula. We were the first infant formula company to earn the Clean Label Project Purity Award. And while we've put a lot into ByHeart, there's a long list of things you won't see on our ingredient list, like no corn syrup, no maltodextrin, no GMO ingredients, no soy, no palm oil. ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.